and welcome back to the Risk Takers and Trailblazers Women in Insurance podcast. Today's episode is an important one, and it's a big topic. Because it's such a huge topic, we are putting this episode into two parts. We're deep diving into the growing number of women being diagnosed with ADHD in their late 30s and 40s and really asking why. Why is this happening? Why were so many of us missed? And what does ADHD actually look like for women in the workplace? This topic is close to my heart because I was diagnosed with ADHD last spring, and honestly, it was a huge shock to me and my family because what we thought ADHD was, that boy in your class who never sat down, never listened, and disrupted everything, was not actually what it looks like for many people, and especially women who have ADHD. So, if you ever wondered whether you might have ADHD or you know someone who does, or maybe you just want to better understand neurodiversity and how it shows up in the workplace and in leadership, this episode is for you. I'm so excited to welcome Erika Mohle. She's a registered psychologist and certified executive coach who helps leaders unlock their full potential. With a blend of deep psychological insight and real-world leadership experience, Erika helps people navigate the complexities of modern leadership, including the impact of neurodiversity at work. She's practical, she's insightful, and she's here to help us understand how different brains can not only function, but truly thrive in today's workplace. Welcome, Erika. We're so excited to have you here today.
Yay! Thank you so much for having me and for that very warm welcome. Very happy to be
Amazing.
here.
Aw. So obviously this is a big topic for us and one that's really important for me. So I thought, Erica, should we just start with the basics? I thought maybe let's see like what does ADHD actually look like in women? And how is that different from the stereotypical image we often hear about?
What a wonderful question. And Tanya, you already started to name how we are seeing this in, of course, the late diagnosis for women, generally between sort of 37, 40 and upwards. And so, as we know, with the system that we currently exist in, where there's so much research on males, and there's a large gap often, and this is true of ADHD, in the research that's available for how it shows up in females and in women. And so what we have observed thus far is that the stereotypical version of ADHD, if we imagine, a young boy, hyperactive, moving around, hard to keep his bum in a seat, that because of, there's a few layers, but because of the layer of socialization of women, where we are socialized to fit in, to not be seen, to not cause trouble, that often what can happen then is our ADHD symptoms as women and as girls, as females, can become internalized. And so what that means, of course, is that it's harder for clinicians to observe it, and sometimes for us to even see it in ourselves as females. And so very often, because of these layers, A, that we don't understand it because of the research that's available to us right now, and B, because of socialization, these symptoms become internalized. What it ends up looking like for women with ADHD, it will often look like inattentive symptoms, which can look like, okay, difficulty focusing, disorganization, or, and Tanya, you and I had a conversation about this offline, or needing lots of systems to stay organized. It might look like trouble keeping your desk tidy, or trouble prioritizing tasks, forgetfulness, forgetting appointments, misplacing your wallets, your keys, your phone, missing dates and important deadlines. When we, as ADHDers with women, we might also have some trouble with time management. We might zone out during conversations. And these things, they look different for different people. And sometimes we even have trouble seeing them in our own selves because we're so socialized to mask, and we'll talk more about this, I'm sure, and to see ourselves as and to make sure that we're being seen in a particular way. So if we are trying to present to others in a particular way, then often we're also not noticing how we actually feel, which is part of why also we sometimes will not bring forward our symptoms to a clinician because we're not aware of it.
Erica, just listening to that amazing description of what happens, the thought that popped into my mind is the age correlation and also diagnosis of, do you think there's any timeline or doctors misdiagnose with perimenopause? Because those symptoms that you've absolutely just explained, like my brain fog, my, you know, rolling off into somewhere else when I should be doing something different. They're so similar. So do you also think that there could be a correlation that either A, it's misdiagnosed or just fluffed off, as you know, that's what often happens is, oh no, it's just the big menopause or premenopause symptoms. You don't have anything else.
Absolutely. And as you're alluding to, well, from the time we're 20 and older, each decade, our estrogen is decreasing as females.
Mhm.
And as you know, in perimenopause, when our estrogen is going down even further, ADHD is an issue of low dopamine, low
Mhm.
norepinephrine or noradrenaline, and some serotonin stuff too. And so as our estrogen goes down during perimenopause, dopamine actually closely follows estrogen. And so that's, as you're naming, Helen, why we would see sometimes symptoms become worse or become more apparent. And the systems that we used to use that used to work, and we could kind of feel like, yeah, all the wheels are on. Like, okay, maybe I'm sweating a little more than average, but this is okay. This is all right. They start to sort of falter as that hormonal shift occurs. And as you're alluding to, it can be difficult to tease apart what is
Mhm.
perimenopause, what's ADHD, but
Mhm.
sometimes perimenopause brings ADHD to light.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
that is how I got my diagnosis. I think I didn't know. Honestly, I didn't know. And things were getting worse. So I had more difficulty concentrating at work, which is really unlike me. Like I always knew for me, the advice is for when you start your day, start the task you hate the most or the hardest task first. No, that would never work for me. It had to be the task I was really interested in first. And I even found with tasks I liked, I was just staring at my computer and I just couldn't get to it. Major memory gaps that didn't exist before. I got to the point where I was like, do I have early dementia? I'd walk into a room, like a pantry, and I'd be like, I am making dinner, right? So what am I making and why did I walk in here? I lost 7 pairs of glasses in 3 months. In really weird, random places. And I think the hardest part was the emotional regulation. I was discovering and it felt like perimenopause, the fogginess. Not sure about the attention part, but the emotional dysregulation was really coming to light. I always thought of myself as being pretty stable. And then I was like, oh, obviously it's perimenopause. And it wasn't really, honestly, until a friend of mine who's very similar to me in how she operates confronted me, was like, hey, I got an ADHD diagnosis and you're very similar to me. You should look into it. That I even was like, what do you mean? And for a lot of women, it's kids, having kids. And because your systems don't work when you're not getting enough sleep and that constant stimulation, things start to break down, and the hormones, perimenopause. And I had the convergence of both. Yeah,
Lucky you, Tanya.
I know it was really fun.
I have a question that's not really on the list, but I do
Mhm.
want to ask it. Tanya, exactly what you were just saying about, well, yeah, like sleep can get pushed off. Like, there's just a number of different things when you're balancing a career and a family, and I'd like to understand how much of that plays into the vast amount of people that are women that are being diagnosed with ADHD. And did we just ignore it before, or is that this elevated because we're going a million miles a minute, we're running a household, we're having careers, we're traveling. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, right?
Absolutely. I'll go for it. And then Tanya and I'll, of course, add as you have things to add. So many layers and so many, yeah, a variety of factors that are intersecting. And Jen, I love what you're naming around. We are at this moment in our Western society where as women, we are holding most things. we're holding making money, we're holding still being CEO at home. And there's also this, Tanya and I talked about this a little bit offline as well. There's also, as a result to some degree of social media, where we actually get to hear about the experiences of more people and a wider variety of people, we're also starting to hear more about the individual experiences of women and girls from that vantage point, which helps us to collect information and identify patterns that eventually become scientifically validated, but first start as, yeah, we're all having this feeling, or a lot of us are having this experience. And so I would say absolutely. Another layer here too can often be because women with ADHD and all folks with ADHD need to overcompensate, right? We respond to it by overcompensating, perfectionism, high achievement. And that does work for decades for many of
Mm-hmm.
us. I'm
Mm-hmm.
also diagnosed ADHD in my 30s. And so
Mm-hmm.
eventually we come to this point where our systems, we always talk about cortisol, of course, our systems just, they really do hit a point. And we see this, right? With folks, with women who have ADHD, about 55% experience burnout. That's one data point, of course, I'm sure there's many. And we see that it's also the accumulation of living a lifetime of showing up in this way that then
Mhm.
just starts not to work anymore, is what I would
Yes.
see.
Yeah, interesting.
And Erica, I would love to expand further that because masking is a huge part that girls and women do. And I also want to point for the record, and I think it was 20 years ago, they didn't think women had ADHD. It wasn't part of the diagnostic criteria. So this is very recent, really, in our medical history that we started diagnosing women. And now, I think even more recently, last 5 or 7 years, please, Erica, correct me if I'm wrong, they didn't even know that autism and ADHD can occur together, which is huge. And when you get diagnosed, like as I did, and Erica, I don't know if this happened to you, it's genetic. So you're looking at your family like, who did I get this from? And it was once you know what it is outside the misbehaving boy in class, and once you know that, you're like, it was my mom. I got it from my mom. And like you see it, and you see the genetic component. And yeah, it's very interesting. And something, Erica, I really want to talk to you about is the toll. Because when we talk about burnout, and I was suffering burnout after burnout after burnout, I was seeing doctors, naturopaths. I'm like, something's wrong with me. I can't just keep burning out like this. And that also actually led to my ADHD diagnosis because a lot of it was masking and perfectionism. So, if you could talk to us of your experience with women specifically, I know men suffer from it too, but I think disproportionately women suffer from that perfectionist, social accepting, masking part of it and the toll you see it have on them.
Absolutely. Oh, such a wonderful thing to illuminate, because it's, I think, has such an impact. And if you wish to, I know I'd emailed them to you, we can throw a masking assessment in the
Oh
show
my
notes
goodness.
for folks if you want to go
Yes,
through it. I know for me, when I was
absolutely.
getting assessed, I was going through it and I was like, oh wow, yeah, okay. And so the masking piece, and of course, to some degree in life, we're showing up in the way that we believe the situation demands of us. And that's a skill for any of us, any social location. And again, because of the socialization of females and the way that we are sort of expected, and of course, most of us reject these things as archaic in our conscious minds, and all of us have still been injected with this because we live in the society that we live in. And so, especially because of this idea, as you're naming, Tanya, that as women, we're supposed to show up as calm, as composed, as organized. We've got everything, um, we've got everything sort of under control. And to some degree, that's a little bit opposite to how an ADHDer presents without being masked, right? Usually a bit scattered, kind of like high energy at times, like forgetting this, forgetting that, rushing around here. And part of that, tangent for a moment, then I'll come back, is that we have this, the things that help us move are if we're interested, right? If there's urgency. And
Mhm.
so often we'll turn towards those things to get us going. And we'll do that for decades on end, which is also a bit tiring for our nervous systems over time. I saw your eyebrows just did. You're like,
Yeah.
yep. And so considering this, we use these systems and these processes, sometimes unintentionally and unconsciously, to be able to get through life. But then we also have this knowledge that we're supposed to present in a certain way. So we're doing all these things sort of under the surface. We're sort of like that duck, right? We
Mm.
know that we're supposed to look calm, and then our feet are just going, 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 even above
Mhm.
average for ADHDers because we're adapting to a world that's created for, of course, for neurotypicals. And so the masking itself is another layer of what becomes so tiring.
Mm.
And again, when we don't notice we're doing it, we almost sort of self-mask. We almost sort of don't even notice. And that makes it difficult for us to understand ourselves as well, which then can kind of interrupt or get in the way of um, bringing forward the symptoms that we experience and then having clinicians be able to help us out with that too.
Interesting.
And what's an example of a common mask women would show in
Yeah.
the workplace?
Yeah. It often will be, it's different. You had mentioned, Tanya, this emotional regulation piece, the emotional dysregulation piece. And that's a
Mhm.
piece actually it doesn't show up in the DSM, and it is a piece that actually a lot of ADHDers say, this is actually the hardest part of having a brain like this, because it takes a lot of time and energy to regulate internally. With the masking, we can show up as I'm driving to work. I am furious because somebody cut me off, and I
Mhm.
can still show up as I'm calm, but
Mhm.
my body is really activated. My muscles are tense.
Mm.
And there's this part where still in many work systems, it isn't safe to show up to and acknowledge what we are actually experiencing. And so it's a lot of containing, swallowing, moving our bodies more slowly, appearing to be organized when we're not. A big one is one thing that can happen for ADHDers is word recall. Sometimes we'll have
Mhm.
trouble recalling a specific word.
Mhm.
And so, of course, when we're speaking in a context like this, even, right? None of us wants to forget a word that will really help the audience understand what we're talking about. None of us wants to be seen appearing incompetent. And so, with ADHDers, we'll sort of know our brains can do that. And we'll do the thing where we're trying to, okay, I'm going to re ask the question back so that I have time to remember what this word is. And so, we're doing all this work to appear a particular
Mhm.
way. And that's, I think, a great example of masking and the energy that it takes to mask.
So that's in the professional day to
Yeah,
day. What about in their personal day to
I was
day?
just going to ask
Mhm.
that.
Yes, beautiful, beautiful. And Tanya, of course, please jump in with your personal experiences as you wish to, of course. Personal can look like, I'll share an anecdote. I have a dear friend, and she once said to me, like, you just seem so put together,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know? And I was like, thank you very much. And my internal experience is very different than that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it helped me to sometimes, not always, but sometimes, especially when I'm not doing all the things that I know I need to do to have this kind of brain. And what it can look like is essentially really putting a lot of effort into showing up on time. And that sometimes will look like, I'm really bad for this. I'm really good at showing up at exactly the right time. But what
Mhm.
that means is because I let the urgency build, and then all of a sudden, I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, gotta go. And then I'm feeling like motivated and energized, but it's also very taxing. And so it might be things like showing up on time. It might be things like not demonstrating or showing an emotion to the degree that I feel it, because I can see
Mhm.
that for other people, it can seem like a lot. It might seem like hiding that I'm losing things all the time because people might
Mhm.
judge me for it. It might seem like um, often, not always, but often we'll have deep empathy
Mhm.
and we'll have this rejection sensitivity, a lot of us. And so, we get constructive feedback in our personal lives. And we know that to be in relationship, it's important that we're able to take it in, and we hide that we feel sensitive, right? We're in a group and somebody says something that we feel hurt by, and we hide that. We don't show it because we know yeah, a neurotypical might not feel hurt by this. And so I am going to be othered, or I'm going to be seen as there's something wrong with me. So I don't show that. Does that answer your question, hon? Yeah.
For me, Helen, it was in my personal life, if I knew someone was coming over, I would literally have a panic attack because in my work life, I show up as very organized and very on top of things and very like, Tanya never lets the ball drop. But something has to give. And it gives in the personal life. So my house is messy. The laundry hasn't been put away, like last night's dinner hasn't been cleaned up. And so for me, it's almost like before the diagnosis, I would have called it anxiety or like imposter syndrome as being a mom because I was going to be discovered. And now with the ADHD diagnosis, like they're going to discover something's not right with me. And so I would scream at my husband, like, everybody clean, because no one can find out that I'm also chaotic. I have a chaotic side to me. Which yeah, I'm working on letting go and working on behavioral patterns to help keep the house organized because we have all or nothing thinking, Erica. I don't know if you coach on that. The all or nothing thinking is dangerous. It is not good. And so looking at the little progress rather than if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do something 100% all the way within
Mhm,
2 hours
mhm.
when it takes most people weeks, right?
Yeah.
So
Do
yeah.
you do you feel, Tana, this is a personal question to you.
Mhm.
Do you feel more comfortable in your own skin and your own space since your diagnosis?
That's a really good question. I think first, to be honest, and we're always honest on this episode, I felt a lot of shame with the diagnosis. And I think partly because I was ignorant about what it was, and there's still stigma. Like I was worried
Mhm,
maybe people would think I wouldn't be able to do my job, or
mhm,
you have these fears. But then when I did more research, especially the masking part, I didn't realize how much I mask from day, even little things, even like I like to shake my leg, but I stopped doing it because people comment, "Why are you leg shaking?" I didn't know why. I just thought I was over caffeinated to like doing more of this because I had to move my body. Or
yes.
recently, I realized drinking coffee in meetings is stimming. I didn't even know that, but I had to have some part of my body moving, but like it could be
Amazing.
anything to like, don't divulge too much personal information to
Right?
someone you just met, girl. Just like keep it surface level, and it's been really liberating. I don't know, Erica, if you had this with your own diagnosis and with the people you work with, once you get diagnosed, all these symptoms become worse at first because you're actually noticing it. So I started to
Mhm.
notice how inattentive I really was in conversations. So
Mm.
I'd be talking to like my boss, and my mind is like, oh, I need to pick up the girls, or oh, I'm working on this book in the background, which I've never put down on paper, or like it could be seven different conversations, but then I can come back and still continue a conversation. The scariest part for me is driving. When you start to pay attention to your inattentiveness, I am never there driving, and that is so dangerous, so dangerous.
Mm.
Um, and then once you notice the symptoms, they become really prevalent. Then it's managing it, but not. I guess, Erica, this is where I'm struggling with. Here's a coaching session. I don't want to just operate the way a neurotypical expects me to operate because it goes inherently against how my brain works. But at the same time, we have to find systems that allow us to operate within a neurotypical environment. Now, I did pick a career that's marketing, which I found out is like the number one career women pick if they have ADHD because there's so much like adrenaline, dopamine, like everything is last minute. You got to get this out, and there's so much creativity involved. I just don't know what the answer is. Like, how much do I conform and how much do I just kind of embrace it?
Yes. Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Yes. And the annoying question is it depends, or the annoying answer to that question is it depends. And I'm going to go on a tangent and come back. As you're naming, I had this experience as well. Got diagnosed, felt shame about it, um, and then moved. And I'm still a person, I still have a complex emotional world, as you can imagine, and I see myself moving more into being able to celebrate. And this brain can do these other things, which is
Mhm.
really wonderful. Like there are strengths and gifts that come with it as well. But and that Often the information of the diagnosis itself, I know this has been true for me. I know I've heard many people express this experience, even regardless of gender, that understanding it in ourselves helps us to move over time from, oh, this is a character flaw. I'm lazy. I'm
Yeah.
stupid. There's something wrong
Yes.
with me, to, oh, I literally have this kind of brain. And
Hmm.
what it means is that I need to show up in the world in a different way. So I'll use anecdotal examples. For me, what I've learned, I'm combined type. So what that means is I have inattentive stuff and I also have hyperactive stuff. And quick sidebar also in inattention, there's another way to describe ADHD called vast variable attention stimulus trait, which really does acknowledge that it isn't actually that we can't pay attention. It is that we need to be more intentional about choosing where our attention is, and we need lots of tools to be able to do that. Because when we like something, we're above average in terms of being able to pay
Yeah.
attention to it, which has its true strengths to it. And so an example might be I'm also hyperactive type. So I need to move my body a lot. And so what this means for me in my day is I am walking a ton. I have a walking pad. I go outside for walks. I run up my stairs. I'm finding pockets that is not neurotypical, right? Like most people do not need that amount of movement for them to kind of get through their day in a way that they need to. And I do. And so that's a way that I can, that's just a practical example of what it might look like for me to still be able to show up to meetings and to still be able to show up and be able to pay attention, but and that I'm still adapting. So I moved from I should be able to just sit in a chair all day and be well to, oh, my system actually needs something different. And
Hmm.
so often, again, it's the diagnosis and us understanding our individual symptoms that then help us customize. Then what do I need to do to be able to adapt to this neurotypical world without feeling like I need to be neurotypical? Does that answer your
Hmm.
question?
I think that's so key. I think that is so key for the audience, and I think that helps you um, really get over any level of labeling or stigma or shame. And quite frankly, I think as you get into your 30s and 40s, there is that coming back to self-understanding that happens with all of us, whether there's an underlying underdiagnosis of ADHD or not, right?
Hmm.
So I think it's a very good call out to say, okay, well, I know this about myself, so I'm going to adapt my life, my career, my family, those things, and put
Hmm.
myself first in that regard. And I think part of this, and it was something that you said was really interesting about um, if I like to do something, I'm
Mhm.
all in, right?
Hmm.
Or,
Hmm.
when you had said, and I see that particularly with my 15-year-old daughter. Um, and then everything else is kind of like, man, And I think part of that is like what teenager, or person in general. I think that's kind of where it crosses for me. It's like, okay, well, yeah, then maybe that is part of the advice for human beings in general. Like,
Hmm.
obviously, you can't go through life always doing what you want to do 150% of the time. But if you're finding that 80% of the time you're doing the things you do not want to do, I mean, you're in complete turmoil majority of the time, right? So,
One thing I
Yeah.
want to add is like you just mentioned about your daughter, like as a mom of somebody who's going through she went through ADHD testing and autism and all of that. And somebody said to me, "How does this make you feel like if you get the diagnosis?" And I looked at them and I said, "It's not a it's not a cancer diagnosis. It's not, like it's going to give me tools to know how to better
Mhm.
her, how to make her her best self. It's just going to give me the maybe the answers to the way just to help her through life or how her brain works. It's not
Mhm.
it's not something that I'm going to be, oh my goodness, that's just the way
Hmm.
she is. That's her. Like it's not an illness, I
Yes.
guess.
yeah.
And Erica, I do want to like address this because now that I know it's genetic, I can see which one of my kids has ADHD. And I was talking about it with a friend. She's 7. I was like, I think I'll wait till she's 8 to do an official diagnosis because I also want to track everything because she's a girl. It can be harder to diagnose because she presents like the model student. She sits still, she pays attention at school. At home, it's the opposite. So I'm like tracking everything to get her a proper diagnosis. But someone was like, but don't you think she'll use it as a crutch if you diagnose her in childhood? Don't you think like she'll just keep using it as an excuse to like not do things? I was like, and so how do you have those conversations with people? Because that was one of the reasons why I didn't want to talk about my ADHD. I was worried people might think I'm using it as a crutch to not achieve.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great, great, wonderful, beautiful question. And it is complex in that, all of us have different levels of awareness, all of us have been given different resources, and therefore sometimes we will relate to any diagnosis as sort of
Hmm.
a crutch. I know that sometimes there's overlap between the highly sensitive person trait and ADHD, and it's the same thing in that field where somebody's like, well, I'm highly sensitive, so I can't, da 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 da. And so while it is certainly possible for any of us to use any diagnosis sort of in that particular way, um, it is not, that possibility does not mean that we should not give people the tool and the resource of the information of a diagnosis. And of course, for any of us, if we have a kiddo and they're like, well, I can't do my homework because I have ADHD, whatever it is, we're gonna parent. I don't have kids
Hmm.
myself, but you're gonna parent, you're gonna observe if that
Hmm.
is something that happens, and you're gonna help them through that aspect of having a diagnosis. And that's just a normal human experience.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, the possibility that it might be a crutch, like anything might be,
Hmm.
does not mean that we don't want to use all this helpful information that we have to support kids and adults
Yeah.
alike.
I think in today's world, it isn't so much as a crutch as it is an aid because we
Hmm.
have put a light on it, highlighted it, spotlighted it, versus, roll back the film to black and white almost, where,
Hmm.
people with any type of autism or, non-socially conformed way were kept in the back.
I don't know why we're sitting. Are we shameful because women expect to be all things, right? So for Tan, um your example of like, well, I'm super brilliant here, but my kitchen's a mess. And I feel terrible about that. But then I'm thinking, why are we even seeing that as terrible? Why aren't we like, we can't? So is it, if we go forward to say, okay, we're here now, how do we educate and I'm culprit for it. How do we educate women, men, whoever is not only want to say word struggling, has this type of brain. So for my daughter, I got to really check myself and be like, you know what? Maybe your bathroom in your bedroom is just going to be a mess
I did
because
that.
you know uh,
What I did with my kids.
so you're focused on these other areas of your
Hmm.
life, and you're doing very well, you're very happy in those areas of your life. So why are we sitting here trying to make it all things?
Okay, we're coming up on time for part 1 of our special episode with Erika Mohle, all about ADHD, neurodiversity, and women in the workplace. Join us next week for part 2, where we'll discuss ADHD superpowers and other important issues and benefits and all of that surrounding neurodiverse individuals in the workplace. Thank you so much for joining us today, and please remember, if this episode resonates with you or anyone else you know, please share. It is an important topic that doesn't have a lot of information, especially for professional women in the workplace. So if this could help a friend or is helping you or a sister or even someone else you know might benefit from this episode, we'd really love it if you'd share. Thank you. Bye, everybody.